Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris, Rum and Coke number 3, and we're on part 3, even though it's chapter 6. The Enduring Mystery of Jack the Ripper from LEMMiNO. We're going to get into the video. I didn't know if I had something else to say. I don't. Did not mix that one good. Did not. Bad, Kris. Bad. Okay. If you are here, part 1 and 2 are already up. Jump back, check them out if you're interested. If not, join in part 3 and roll with us. Okay? So here it goes.
On the morning of November the 9th, a merchant and property owner named John McCarthy was going through his bookkeeping. McCarthy was the landlord of Miller's Court, and the tenants of room 13 had fallen behind on their rent. McCarthy sent at once for his assistant, Thomas Boyer, to collect the money at 11:15. After knocking twice without response, Boyer went around the corner to peer through a window. But his view was obstructed by a coat or curtain, so Boyer had to reach through a broken window pane to pull it aside. That's when he saw the severely mutilated body of a woman lying upon a bed in the corner of the room. Miller's Court was soon crawling with police, but the door to room 13 was locked and had to be forced open with a pickaxe. What they found inside was truly the stuff of nightmares. The sight we saw, I cannot drive away from my mind. It looked more like the work of a devil than of a man. The whole scene is more than I can describe. I hope I may never see such a sight again.
Damn.
Dr. George Phillips described the body as, quote, cut all to pieces. Dr. Thomas Bond described the woman's face as, quote, hacked beyond recognition. The abdomen had been, quote, emptied of its viscera, while the throat had been, quote, severed all round, down to the bone. The body had been monstrously disfigured, with loose organs dispersed all around it. The room itself was sparsely furnished and offered little in the way of clues. 2 tables.
Apologize, I was looking to see where I was going to, I forgot.
1 or 2 chairs, and a small cabinet. Amongst the ashes of a fireplace, the police found patches of burned clothing. Had the killer tried to dispose of evidence? Or had it merely been used for warmth and light? The victim was identified almost immediately. Her name was Mary Jane Kelly, and she was the tenant of 13 Miller's Court. But nearly everything about Kelly's life is shrouded in mystery. She was presumably of Welsh or Irish descent and in her mid-20s, making her the youngest victim by far. But given that no matching records of a Mary Jane Kelly have been found, it's probable that she was using a fake identity. In any case, Kelly had not been living alone. Up until a few days before the murder, she had cohabited with a man named Joseph Barnett. They had only separated on October the 30th because Barnett disapproved of Kelly's prostitution and the people with whom she associated. But they did see each other again. On the evening of November the 8th, Barnett paid Kelly a visit. Upon his arrival, he found Kelly in the company of a woman who was just about to leave. Unfortunately, there are conflicting accounts about who this woman was, when Barnett arrived, and how long he stayed. If we choose to believe Barnett, he arrived at some point between 7 and 7:45 and left before 9 o'clock. Shortly before midnight, Kelly was spotted in the company of a man by her neighbor, Mary Ann Cox. When Cox passed the couple, they were about to enter Kelly's room. Cox bid Kelly goodnight, but she was, quote, very much intoxicated and barely able to respond. Once they had gone inside, Cox could hear Kelly singing. When Cox then left the court about an hour later, Kelly could still be heard singing. By 2 o'clock, Kelly had apparently ventured back outside, for she was spotted by a man named George Hutchinson. The two of them were supposedly well acquainted, and Kelly had asked if he could spare a few coins. But Hutchinson was broke, and Kelly was desperate for money, so they soon parted ways. Moments later, Hutchison observed Kelly being accosted by a well-dressed man. The two of them had a seemingly jovial interaction and began walking north. Hutchison found it suspicious that such a well-dressed man would seek the company of a woman like Kelly. As such, when the couple passed him by, he scrutinized the man's appearance. He was, for instance, carrying a pair of gloves in his right hand and a small parcel in his left. Hutchison decided to shadow the couple as they proceeded to Miller's Court. Before they vanished up the court, the man handed Kelly a red handkerchief, and she had supposedly told him, "All right, my dear, come along. You will be comfortable."
Red handkerchief.
Hutchison remained in the vicinity until 3 o'clock, but neither Kelly...
Wasn't a red handkerchief seen on one of the other, not victims, one of the other suspects? I wish I could remember so much of this, but I do remember the red handkerchief part. Now, I mean, I wish I could remember so much of this from my youth, but I do remember in this video hearing about a red handkerchief. Apologies.
No, the man reappeared. At roughly the same time, Cox returned home. In stark contrast to the loud singing upon her last departure, Cox was now struck by the complete absence of sound and light from Kelly's room. Finally, at approximately 4 o'clock, a tenant above and a woman across from Kelly's room heard cries of murder. The voice was that of a woman, and it appeared to emanate from nearby. Meanwhile,
didn't that first murder do the same thing? There were the cries of murder and all that. These aren't... I know they're not repeating. Have I been drinking too much?
other denizens of the court heard no screams at all.
Yeah.
According to Dr. Bond, Kelly died between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. Dr. Phillips placed the time of death a few hours later. But some witnesses were quite adamant that they had seen or even spoken to Kelly as late as 8 or 10 o'clock in the morning. Keep in mind that her body was discovered at 11:15. These contradictions are difficult to reconcile, and the precise time of death eludes us to this day. Mary Jane Kelly is typically regarded as the Ripper's final victim. Along with Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, and Catherine Eddowes,
Mary Jane Kelly. Isn't that the one that you can look at the pictures online? I mean, she was ripped apart. If I'm thinking of the right person. But the last victim, I think, was the one. She was on the bed. I have no interest in looking at the pictures. Have no interest in telling you where to find them. If you haven't seen them, I don't recommend it. Even though it's 100-plus-year-old pictures, but still, it's not pretty. But yeah, I remember seeing those pictures. They actually showed them to us in school, and I remember them saying this is graphic and looking at it, and there was a part of me that kind of giggled because I couldn't believe it was real. Because no one could be left looking like that. It couldn't be real. And I still remember going and just not believing it. Just looking up at that board and not believing it. Yeah.
is part of the canonical 5, the 5 victims most likely to have been slain by the same hand. Martha Tabram might have been a victim of Jack the Ripper, but opinions are divided. The same is true of at least a handful.
Tabram. Okay, that was the first one. She was on that balcony. And she was the one who screamed murder. Well, I mean, that doesn't exactly link. But, I mean, yeah. I feel like I could sneeze right now. My apologies.
Of other cases. Even the canonical 5 are not without controversy, so the total number of victims is a matter of debate. Presuming that Kelly was indeed the final victim, one has to wonder why. Why did the murders come to such a sudden end? Did the Ripper give in to fears of being caught? Were they imprisoned for a different crime? Perhaps they succumbed to an illness or committed suicide. Could they have migrated to another country? Perhaps they deliberately changed their modus operandi to confuse the police. The possibilities are virtually endless.
Sorry. Oh, I had a few more sneezes and then I had to blow my nose. Oh, and so I apologize. Good moment of reflection that you got to have.
Which means there is no shortage of suspects.
Maybe he just stopped because he got so close to being caught. There's so many. We'll never know. Oh. Come on.
Following the murder of Marianne Nichols, a rumor began to circulate that someone called Leather Apron was in the habit of abusing prostitutes. The name quickly made its way into the press, and soon enough it became synonymous with the killer. In fact, Leather Apron was the predominant pseudonym before Jack the Ripper. But the man identified as Leather Apron was soon cleared of all suspicion. His real name was John Picer, and he was in a different part of London on the night when Nichols was attacked. This misguided manhunt is somewhat emblematic of the whole investigation. The police pursued even the most tenuous of leads due to a lack of evidence and mounting pressure from the public.
Thought I heard a noise. Sorry. They had to check. They had to check every lead and everything, because if you don't have a whole lot, you have to check everything. I think there's a motorcycle out around here. My apologies. Or I'm just hearing things because I'm dying. I don't know. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. They have to probably check every. I mean, a good cop is going to check everything because you don't know what a lead could turn to. You have to investigate everything. So it's not like, oh, they were stuck investigating all this. They had to. They were probably fed garbage on purpose, but they still have to. You have to check it.
They interviewed thousands, investigated hundreds, and developed numerous theories along the way. In the words of Inspector Frederick Abeline, "Theories. We were lost almost in theories. There were so many of them." In an effort to narrow...
That's what I was saying. You have to check all of them, but you're going to be given garbage. And you know it, but you still got to look.
Down the search, the police used a primitive form of criminal profiling. The idea was to analyze the available evidence to try and gauge what sort of person had committed the crimes. This profile was prepared by Dr. Thomas Bond, and he described the Ripper as a strong, middle-aged man with an inoffensive appearance who dressed respectably. Bond's most controversial assessment was that the killer possessed, quote, "no scientific nor anatomical knowledge." This stood in direct opposition to the opinions of his peers, most of whom ascribed the Ripper with at least a basic understanding of anatomy.
Yeah.
Based on the witness accounts, the Ripper was a man of average height with a medium to stout build in his late 20s to mid-30s. He wore dark clothes, including a hat of some sort, and had a mustache. But this sort of aggregation or tabulation of accounts can be quite deceptive. Not only are many details inconsistent, but they could be describing entirely different people. For all we know, none of the witnesses ever laid eyes on Jack the Ripper. So much is up for debate that one can build a case against almost any suspect. Some have even entertained the possibility that the Ripper was a woman or possibly a man disguised as a woman. While Jill or Jackie the Ripper is an interesting theory, it has failed to achieve any widespread support.
Yeah.
What is rarely in dispute is that the Ripper was either a resident of or otherwise familiar with the East End. After all, he managed to narrowly evade capture on multiple occasions, which implies intimate knowledge of byways and patrol routes. He likely had some form of employment, as the murders were committed around weekends and public holidays, and he may have had some degree of anatomical knowledge.
I'm thinking he lived outside the area. Somewhere outside this area. And to get to work, maybe, frequently walk through. And if you're a killer who wants to explore, you might leave a little bit early one morning and start taking different paths to see where they lead and just kind of keep mental notes. And then just start walking all these various areas. And then maybe start walking them at night. Get a feel of who's out and about. I could be completely full of shit. All I know is I had nothing to do with it. Anyone who thinks that I did, you could be onto something.
With this unshakable profile in hand, let's take a closer look at a few suspects.
Okay.
The question is, where do we even begin? According to criminal profiler and FBI special agent John Douglas, the Ripper was not only a local, but was likely interviewed by the police. If Douglas is correct, the Ripper might be someone we've already met. Either a witness or a person close to one of the victims.
Possible.
What about John Richardson, the witness in the...
He's this guy who walked through and then was cutting the leather off the shoe. He's a guy, definitely, to me.
Chapman case who sat down on the backyard steps to trim a piece of leather from his boot.
Who does that?
Richardson was indeed suspected by the police, but they found, quote, not a shred of evidence against him. His mother also lived on the premises, so he had good reason to be there.
I'd like to send my apologies to him because I just blatantly accused him of murder about 130 some odd years later. So his descendants are watching. I was only joking.
What about George Hutchinson, the witness who followed Mary Jane Kelly after she was accosted by a well-dressed client? Hutchinson never clarified his motivation for shadowing the couple. He merely stated that he was surprised to see a man so well-dressed in the company of a woman like Kelly. Was he surprised because he was concerned? Was he jealous? Was it about money? After all, Hutchinson was broke and the client appeared to be wealthy. Perhaps he waited outside the court with the intention of mugging this well-dressed client.
Could have.
There are many question marks surrounding Hutchinson. He has never been positively identified, so next to nothing is known about his life. This makes it very difficult to build a strong case against him. Hutchinson was interrogated by the police, but ultimately convinced Inspector Frederick Abeline that he was telling the truth. But not every witness attracted such attention from the police. Take for instance Charles Cross, the man who discovered the body of Mary Ann Nichols.
Okay.
On the morning of August the 31st, Charles Cross left his home on Doveton Street and headed for work. When he turned into Bucks Row, he happened upon the body of Mary Ann Nichols. Moments later, he was joined by Robert Paul, and events transpired as previously described. Despite his proximity to the crime, Cross appears to have escaped suspicion from both the press and the police. He was evidently seen as the innocent passerby that he appeared to be. But in recent years, that perception has been challenged. The argument is that Cross was in the act of committing the murder when he was interrupted by the approaching footsteps of Paul. Cross then concealed the murder weapon and portrayed himself as someone who just found the body. The injuries inflicted upon Nichols would be consistent with an interruption, as they were less severe than those of later victims. What's interesting about Cross is that he likely testified under a false name. He claimed to be employed as a carman, and his address was given as 22 Doveton Street. But surviving records show that in 1888, this address was occupied by a man named Charles LEMMiNO. LEMMiNO was also employed as a carman, and on at least one occasion went by the name Charles Cross, as it was the surname of his stepfather. It is now widely believed that Charles LEMMiNO was the man who appeared at the inquest, and that he assumed the name of his stepfather when he testified. His motivation for doing so has been the source of much speculation. Was he trying to conceal his identity, or was it merely a force of habit? After all, contemporary examples of people doing the exact same thing are not difficult to find. The most compelling evidence against LEMMiNO is that his morning commute between home and work roughly coincides with the time and place of the murders.
Getting back to the previous thing, I don't have a problem with him taking his stepfather's last name. He may not have known that LEMMiNO, that his dad, he may not have known him, maybe he died, whatever. So him taking his stepfather's last name, but not changing it legally, whatever the process is, just going by that name, I don't know. I don't have a problem with that. She's snoring again. Yeah, I don't, there's no issue on that with me. And if he's done it for a long enough period, then it's just second nature.
Except for the murders of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, who were killed on a Sunday, the only day when LEMMiNO would have been free from work. Not only that, but all the murders...
I was going to pause it here, but I got carried away. No, I wasn't. I was going to pause it at the end of this one. Sorry.
...were committed around weekends and public holidays. Why would a man who supposedly timed the murders with his morning commute gravitate towards days of rest? In any case, LEMMiNO's mother lived a few blocks south of Burner Street, the neighborhoods around which is also where LEMMiNO spent his childhood. As such, it's speculated that Stride and Eddowes were killed after LEMMiNO paid a late-night visit to his mother. While he claimed to be employed at a delivery firm known as Pickford's, there are no surviving records of his employment. If he did work for Pickford's, there is a fair chance that he delivered meat and would thus have been exposed to slaughter and blood on a daily basis. LEMMiNO remained in East London until his death in 1920 at the age of 71. While there is no evidence of LEMMiNO ever being suspected by the police, it is difficult to believe that he was completely overlooked. Many case files have not survived, so any doubts investigators might have had could have long since disappeared. Now, a witness who definitely attracted attention was Joseph Barnett.
I'm going to stop this one here, and then the last video will be the final ones. Yeah, so I just gave LEMMiNO the cross a big... It's fine. Interesting. Didn't have a job where he said he worked. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about him. hear me out. 2 women he could have killed on the way to his mother's house. Okay. But what about the other 3 then? If if you're just focusing on the 5 and not the other ones where they're saying the Ripper could have, then you have evidence where you could have, in theory, linked him to 2. The other 3, where's your evidence? I mean, where's your link? That's a bit of a stretch. If you have a possibility where you can link 1 to all 5, then that's probably your guy. I don't know. I'm gonna end this one here so I can get a refill for number 4. We're gonna make this party right. Do I want a refill for 4? It's 7:10 p.m. Nah, I probably shouldn't. Although it tastes so good. But I feel pretty good. Alright, we're gonna end this here. Stay tuned for part 4, which is coming up next. It's 20 minutes. Yeah, I should probably make a rum and coke just for consistency. So, have a good day, have a good night. Number 4 is next, obviously.